One of the most crucial steps in working with segmentation is to understand the segments. In other words, try to understand what is the difference between the segment 1 and 2 in terms of using words that you can refer to, such as, for example, the segment of affluent consumers or the segment of value consumers. So, how we come up with these words in order to describe a segment. So, I will show you an example. And here I have the bath soap file that we did in class. We worked with this file in class. And as you can see, the structure in the diagram is the same. So I moved the data source into my diagram. I dropped the variables. I only left the variables I need to work with. And this is perhaps a crucial step in segmentation because if I don't have the right variables, then it will be difficult for me to do an interpretation. So it's always better to start with a lower number of variables rather than with a large number. Uh, you can always add more variables as soon as you need them. But to start is easier to work. Number one, with a low number of segments, and number two, with a smaller number of variables. Uh, I will do transformation, or I will transform variables if I need to. This step is not necessary in some cases. I like to leave it there because more often than not, I will do some sort of transformation or some sort of data manipulation. But look like I'm doing the data transformation after the drop node, meaning I'm transforming variables after I leave only the variables that I need to work with. Then I will filter, and filtering is very important before doing cluster analysis. And as a matter of fact, it's very important for most of the modeling processes because number one, you don't want to have missing variables, and you don't want to have outliers. Then the cluster as normal and the segment profile, that will be the node that will help you to separate or divide the different segments by profiling them. So up to this point, the software will help you to take X number of customers. In the case of your assignments, is 150,000 customers. It will divide them in several groups using more than one variable, which is very interesting. Now, the software will not do the reading for you. So that's when your skills are coming into play. So for this example, I will let you know which variables I'm using for my work uh, with this segmentation. So it's always useful to know what every column or variable means. So you can see here how I only leave 6 variables. I like to start with a very low number, 4, 6, sometimes even 3 variables to start with, and then I will start adding more if I need to. Yes. So it's always better, in my opinion, to start with a low number and go to a high number than the other way around. So here I'm using married, which is the number 1 if the person is married, or 0 otherwise. 1 for on home if the person owns a home, or 0 otherwise. Whether this is a discount buyer, will have a 1 if the person is a discount buyer, or 0 otherwise. The income is the year income in thousands of dollars, and value, that is the total value of purchases, and finally age in years. So I have 6 variables, and I would like to start the segmentation with it. So in regards to data transformation, here I could ignore that if I want to for this step. However, for your assignment, you might need to use data transformation to convert some of the variables. Remember, the idea of this video is to understand how to read the segment profile. So I'm gonna go there quickly. I will run the segment profile with the variables that I told you before. I'm already filtering missing values, so I should not have problems with my segment. So as you can see here in the results window, I will have uh, two main profiles. So this is ideal in my opinion. I prefer to start working from a lower number of segments rather than a high number of segments, because it's just easy for me to understand. So uh, I can see here that the segment 1 has 58.75% of the population, whereas segment 2 have 41.25% of the population. So both segments are important. So uh, the it will be the first step to understand the importance of every segment, because if I have smaller segments that might not contribute to the entire population, I might well just take them out and ignore them. But here I cannot ignore these two big segments. The second step is to go to the variable worth panel. In here, I see that for segment 1, and this is important, the most critical variable is married, whether the person is married or not, and the second one is age. So in other words, what it's telling me is the segment 1 basically is being described by these two variables. Remember, I used I used 6 variables for segmentation, but what this is telling me is that only 2 were important for dividing this group. So when I'm going to describe this segment, I have to see how they were married and age, what will be the age. So it has to be somehow, you know, this combination of these two ones. If I scroll down, I will go to segment number 2, and as you can see, this is not always the case. Sometimes every segment will be described by different variables. So I have to see, especially the first variables that I see are the one that I have to use in order to describe them. Some For this case, it's pretty simple. So I have to describe these two segments in terms of how they were married and their age. So after doing that, I go to the profile segment, and I can see here that segment 1 is married consumer. They're married consumers. Number 1, which is this, if married, 0 otherwise. So segment 1 are married, and then the age, and this is important to explain. Do you see these red bars? It means these red bars mark the mean or the average. So here what it say is that most of the consumers in the sample, or as a matter of fact in the population that I have, are married. However, this segment have more married consumers than any other segment. Then age. So this is we can see that it follows a normal distribution. However, this age chart means that segment 1 is composed of more older consumers. So in other words, segment 1 is they're married and older, whereas segment 2 they are otherwise, let's say, unmarried and younger. So this is a description. This is how you will uh, name them. So uh, now we have to use a word for describing them. For example, married and older could be, uh, a stable consumer. Let's call it that way. And unmarried and younger, let's say millennial consumers, for example. for the lack of a better word. You can probably come up with a better combination of words than I do. But certainly, when I do the description of them, I have to use the most important variables. However, this exercise seems very simple because I use it only two variables. I mean, I use 6 variables, but only two were describing the segments. So that's pretty straightforward. So let's see what happened if I add an extra one. So let me add this variable. This is just for purpose of the example. Yeah. So in other words, I'm adding this purchase total. I don't think this is going to be a good one. Let's try another one. This one could work. Number of purchases in the last 12 months. So let's add this one. Yeah. So this is how it's going to be. By default, when you see this default means they're not going to drop the node. So it's like asking node. So now I have 7 variables in my segmentation, and I can run the segment profile to see what happened. So this is an exploratory approach. So I don't know what's going to happen, to be honest, when I'm adding a variable. That's the whole idea of adding an extra variable, and see if I can have different segments with a better understanding of what the population look like. But I might be wrong. So if I'm wrong, I just roll back what I did. For example, I will remove the variable that I added, and I will probably add a different one, or if I'm done, then that will be it. So these steps are recursive. In other words, you have to keep trying, adding and deleting and changing variables and transforming variables until you get a grasp of what a segment means. And only you can know what a segment means, because that meaning is for you. So once you know what it means, just leave it like that. So you don't have to keep working with these steps. So now this is going to be more complicated. So I added an extra variable, and suddenly I have 10 different segments, which is a large number of segments. So what this is telling me is that the variable that I added, the extra one, is actually creating to divide the segments in more than one group. Yeah. So because of that, I may be willing to go back and replace that variable for another one, because going from 2 segments to 10 segments is just a lot, at least for me. So especially with this data set. Now, having said that, let's follow the approaches that we expect before. So segment 2 is the biggest segment with 13% of the population. Segment 1 has 12% of the population. So they are arranged in ascending order. Now, that is still quite small, 11%. So that's why I'm saying I'll probably pick a different variable. So, however, the purpose of the video was to try to understand how they work. So as you can see here, for segment 2, in my variable words, I see that they are described by whether or not they own a home. They are discount buyers, married, and age. However, the main differentiator is if they own a home. So when I go back to the profiling, I can see that one is they own the home. So these are homeowners that don't buy with discounts. So is one if they are discount buyers, 0 otherwise. One is married, and they are married and older. So I would say they are, let's call it mature consumers. For example, they own a home, they don't buy with discount, they're married, and they're older. Or you can pick a different name in order to refer to the segment. The other one, which is segment 1, you can see the year income. That's where this red chart, the bar, come into play. They're telling me that the mean is lower than this number. So the income in thousands is higher for this segment. So this segment has more income than the other consumers. They're also married. They don't own a home, and they are no discount buyers. So I will say they're affluent because they have a higher income, and they're married. So they're married and affluent, but they are not homeowners. Segment number three, they are discount buyers and married. So I will call them value consumers, for example. Discount buyers seem like to me the type of consumer that go to Costco or Sam's Club and so forth as a family. So then you just need to keep reading into this. So segment six, they are not married, they're young, they have a lower income, and they're not discount buyers. Seem to me millennials, for example. Um, the segment five, they have a lower income, they are married, and here they don't have a home. So, we have to tie these descriptions in order to come up with the segments, the description for the segment, and for the segment profiles that you're getting as a result of the segment profile node. And this is the most important part in segmentation, is to be able to understand what the segments are and what is the meaning behind every segment. So I will go back, and since I don't like this variable that I added because it was adding an extra complexity to my segment, and I can just keep playing and taking other exploring other combination of variables. And listen, this process is an exploratory research that you are doing. You don't know what you are going to get. You need to explore and trying to find the best segmentation that works for you, and you are the one that know when it works for you. uh, as soon as that happen, you just stop. You don't need to be exploring further. So so it's not just about getting a low number of segments. It's not just about getting an easy description for the segments. It's to get the segmentation that works for you. uh, it is true, now you know how are you going to use the segmentation, but you can visualize scenarios such as, what if I'm doing a promotion, what if I'm launching a new product, what if I'm try to work with existing customers to improve their loyalty. So by doing that, you can approach and have different segments based on the final goal that you want to achieve. So here is it. Here it is. This is the segmentation profile that I started with, which in my opinion is easier. Again, I prefer a lower number of segments and a lower number of variables than a bigger one to start with. So I hope that you find this useful, and send me an email or meet me during office hours if you need further information. Thank you.